Welcome to the Security Weekly News wrap-up for the week of 11 July. So summer is going on by. Where have all the PS5s gone? Luminous Moth, Amazon, Microsoft, REvil, Kaseya, and more, along with the show wrap-ups on this edition of the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. For teams looking to inject some security into the DevOps lifecycle, the Uptick Security Analytics platform offers complete security observability for your cloud workloads, including hosts, VMs, containers, and micro VMs. Uptick analyzes builds in development and at runtime for real-time detection of misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, and malicious behavior. Security Weekly listeners can sign up for a free 2-week trial by visiting securityweekly.com/upticks. Cybercriminals are working overtime. They're leveraging activity around the COVID vaccine to disguise phishing attacks, hoping to steal money or personal information from your employees or customers. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner is a free tool you can use right now to help protect your business and ultimately your reputation. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner analyzes your Office 365 accounts and identifies malicious emails that slipped past your gateway and into inboxes. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email. Use the Barracuda Email Threat Scanner for free right now at securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Hello, I'm Doug White from Roger Williams University, your host, and welcome to Security Weekly News wrap-up show. First, all the show topics for the week. On Application Security Weekly number 157, John and Mike did the news, and then Paul hosted Sean Leach, who's the Chief Product Architect at Fastly. Sean was on to talk about how really dated web apps and API security tools really are, and how mostly they were designed a long time ago with the idea of assessment rather than collaboration with the developers. I mean, you can imagine that, right? I mean, and that concept has persisted on into the modern age because that original idea was that developers develop, engineers design, developers develop, and then at the end of that process, somebody gives it a once-over to see if it's okay, and that's not where we're going. That ended up leading to Sean talking about how to write a new set of rules for web apps and API security with more engagement with the developers and all the modern application development stuff. On Business Security Weekly number 223, Jason, Adrian, and Matt had Maurice Stebela, the former CISO at Harman by Samsung and the chairman and co-founder of CX0 Insight. Maurice was on talking about why organizations are continuing to fail at protecting themselves, as we see every day, and what steps we need to take to move to a more secure posture, particularly regarding the rapidly changing security landscape. One of the things that's happened really in the last 2 years is watching as ransomware gangs and others have started to really evolve their software structures into these frameworks that you see today that are so much more versatile and difficult to deal with. So an interesting segment there. In the second segment, 3 things every CISO wishes you understood. What is the BISO role and why is it still necessary? Rising cyber insurance costs and much, much more on their news segment. On Enterprise Security Weekly 234, Adrian, Paul, and Tyler Shields brought on Rajiv Romas, a senior systems engineer at Gas South LLC. Rajiv was on talking about the Gas South and Extra Hot partnership that they put in place to try and improve network visibility for their networking team. It's an interesting segment, talking to somebody from that same industry as Colonial Pipeline. Quite interesting segment, and they had the news in the second segment. In the third segment, Deepika Gajaria, the VP of Product at Tala Security, and Scott Schefferman, the principal strategist at Eclipsium, joined in to talk about threats revolving around zero trust and how we really focus on the idea of zero trust. And it's one of those lip service things that you see all the time where we all say, yes, we have zero trust. It's like we're all excellent, right? I mean, have you ever been to a company that didn't say they were excellent? Like you go to universities and look at them. My daughter was looking for schools, and we go to the university, and I never went to one yet that was like, we really aim pretty low, actually. It's always, we're excellent, everything's excellent. And we do the same thing with zero trust, it seems like. and we talk about it a lot, but then when we actually go to do it, we actually fail to verify and then trust. We just sort of say we're using zero trust, and then we build new technologies and still fall back to the idea of you trust and then trust kind of things. So this was what this segment was about, and they went on to talk about how attackers leverage all these flaws, and they will attack. On Security and Compliance Weekly number 79, Flea, Jeff, Josh, and Scott were talking with Jordan Weissman, the principal consultant at Online Business Systems. They were talking about HIPAA and some of the things HIPAA doesn't do. Like one of the things that a lot of people have been asking is, can your company doesn't HIPAA keep your company from requiring you to disclose whether you've been vaccinated or not? And then, of course, it doesn't. And so there was some stuff on there. And they also talked about how ransomware has been targeting healthcare. And then, obviously, they continued on with that in their second segment and so forth. And on Security Weekly News number 133, I was back. Jason Wood was there, and he had commentary on how brute forcing still works and how APT 28 has been using that tactic worldwide of late. They've adapted it, obviously, to a more containerized virtual machine kind of model. But the reality is that it always worked, and it always will work, because you can always, if you can generate enough cycles to brute force something, you can brute force just about anything. It's just a matter of, can you do that in a reasonable amount of time. On Paul Security Weekly number 702, the live return of Jeff Mann, as Jeff entered the studio for the first time in more than a year, I think. We also got to have dinner with Jeff on Wednesday night, which at least started to feel like old days at cons, and hopefully someday that world will return. Maybe we're not sure yet. In the first segment last night, Scott Schefferman, the principal strategist at Eclipsium, was on to talk about the BIOS Connect feature. Vulnerabilities in the Dell client BIOS. It was a big story a couple of weeks ago. We covered that story, and it affected 129 different models of Dell devices, which, as you might guess, represents a very large number of devices worldwide. Firmware security was the general idea of this segment. In the second segment, Jack Reiseter from Darknet Diaries, so famous podcaster, joined in just to talk to talk to him. Fun segment and an exciting guest, so that's definitely one worth watching. And in the third segment, the news. My favorite threat of the week is not really a threat. I saw this article that was on Security Weekly last night and had been in the news about quantum computing, and certainly quantum computing is nothing new to any of us. We've been hearing this for a long time. The reason I was going to talk about it was how it's a buzzword. And pretty soon, and there are already probably, I would guess, marketing groups that are working on this, you're going to see all kinds of products that are going to be quantum enabled and quantum capable, quantumable, quantumify. That's coming, and you're going to see all kinds of products with the word quantum on them. And it's just the typical stuff that you expect, and next thing you know, you're getting AI-enabled sex toys and AI-enabled hand creams, AI-enabled meat-scented candles. It detects what kind of meat you're craving and smells that way. Right, sure. And all that typical marketing stuff. Quantum's been this kind of like boogeyman for the last few years, because in cybersecurity anyway, quantum's been that thing that's been sort of bandied about as quantum's coming. And we see pretty regular stories pop up that have headlines like quantum computing will change everything, or quantum computing will make everything we know obsolete. All security will be obsolete. Corn on the cob? Obsolete. It's quantum on a cob now. Disk storage on a cob? No, it's quantum disk storage on a cob. Pretty much everything will be on a quantum cob based to some degree, or, it might just be like Wolf Boy discovers glowing doorway at 68th Street subway station, says quantum cobs transformed my life and cured my male pattern baldness. Yeah, so maybe not quite that crazy. I don't know. The New York Post, come on. But you know the drill. So the idea of quantum has been around for a while. I think the original paper was in like 1980 that described the concept of quantum computing, and it's been sort of bubbling in that academic community for a while. You see a lot of papers written about, quantum theorizing and so forth. And obviously quantum physics and other quantum concepts have been around a lot longer than that. to me, the quantum computing thing is very similar to what was going on when people were talking about valves or vacuum tubes and transistors. And so back in the, I don't know, late 50s, early 60s, transistors represented this massive paradigm shift in computing capacity, because suddenly you could jam all these, circuits onto a tiny device using transistors. And that really did revolutionize the computer world. It made everything obsolete. Transistorized cobs were like the biggest thing of the age. And suddenly you had a small enough controller and storage set that you could have a talking, smart, AI-enabled toilet. I saw one of those recently, or a Fitbit. I mean, quantum's one of those words that we use to describe things that can achieve quantum states, which starts to edge over into this world of bong hits, weird sex dreams about Einstein and Schrodinger, Zaphod Beeble-Brock's infinite probability drives, porn involving historical figures, cat jokes, and endless Rick and Morty references. But quantum ideas are real, and some of them are pretty strange, like spooky action at a distance and quantum entanglements and all that kind of stuff. And that even, really pushed people like Planck and Einstein pretty much out to the edge of their own capabilities in terms of being able to try to process all that. But in terms of computing, the goal has been pretty much to attain a situation where a computer could use a qubit, a quantum bit, which could have states that would transcend 0, and 1, which means that effectively a computer could become really, really, really small and really, really, really powerful just because you could do more with less. Now, there's all kinds of other quantum computing concepts. So if you're out there shouting at the screen or shouting at clouds or whatever and saying, Doug, you're an idiot, I know there's all these other kinds of quantum computing concepts and other quantum concepts as well, like quantum annealing and all these kind of things that are out there. But the qubit one seems to be the direction everybody's latched onto, I think because it's currently sort of obtainable. Ultimately, though, it's very similar to the valve to transistor business that went on, because really it's not a quantum computer is not going to create a TARDIS or anything like that. It's really just a way to take what we have and make it really, really small and really, really fast. Now, that means that there are problems that we thought were unsolvable today, that because it would take longer than the expected lifespan of the universe for something to actually be done, that could be solved very quickly. And this was a quantum leap over where we are now, much like the transistors were a non-quantum but very quantum leap over the valve computers that existed before. And, when we made that move, all of a sudden you could add up a column of figures, like instantaneously, without enough hardware to fill Yankee Stadium and enough electricity to power the East Coast for a couple of days. And, all of a sudden the only thing valves were good for was guitar amps. But where in a guitar amps, valves are good because they're bad. Yeah, really. That's why. So what does it all mean? Well, I think it's coming. And it's probably coming sooner than people originally hypothesized maybe 15, 20 years ago. And I do think it will create a massive transition in terms of crypto and computing power that uses so much less space and power than we currently have that we may get to that nano frontier. I don't know, 16K video games. But IBM and others are working hard to see who will be the first one to tame this beast. IBM released Hummingbird last month, which has 65 qubits. And I think Honeywell has one. There's a company called Rigetti Computing that has 31 qubit machine. So these do not have very many qubits in them currently that are stable. So quantum stuff is by default unstable. And, trying to stabilize even 65 qubits has proved to be a real, serious long-term laboratory problem. And they need supercooling and all sorts of really expensive components, and that just gets them to a point where they can barely function. But think about where we were with transistorized computers back in, 1960. And, I get it. And, right now the qubit computers just keep printing out kill me in binary, but it's coming. And just like UNIVAC, I think all the things we have today will look like UNIVAC did when we were looking at it on an Apple IIe. And, it'll look like the past. And some of us will be around later and talking about the pre-quantum days. Just like there were people around talking about the pre-transistor days. I embrace that change. I mean, if you can break every crypto in history in a microsecond, so what? You can generate new algorithms that are really hard to break and even bigger, and quantum cryptos that will prevent all that. You just have to evolve and adapt, and all of us are pretty much good at that, because if we weren't, we wouldn't be here. I, for one, welcome our new quantum overlords. And yeah. And now the news. All right. Kaseya has patched the 0 days in VSA product, which were the very exploits that allowed REvil to attack them and their customers in what was the latest major supply chain attack. So back in April, the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure reported 7 vulnerabilities to Kaseya, and Kaseya did proceed to patch some of them, but they did not patch the VSA, that's Virtual Server Administration Tool. They did not patch the VSA. REvil then proceeded to take advantage of that and launched a major operation on the 2nd of July that targeted 60 managed service providers who were using that VSA tool, and that included then around 1,500 customers of the managed service providers, and they all got hit with ransomware from REvil. Good old REvil. The mitigation advice from Kaseya was basically shut down VSA. But they have now released a patch for it. The article does include steps for admins to follow before you start up after you patch, because you may have already been compromised, and there may be compromises from that vulnerability that were not just REvil exploits. There may be other people exploiting them as well. Along the same lines, REvil, who is often associated with Russia, seems to have disappeared. REvil's dark web, their blog is still up apparently, but there are some of their dark web and all their public websites went down on Tuesday mysteriously. And the last known response from a server was at 1 a.m., but the article didn't say what time zone that was. So most of their sites, which they use for ransom collection and instructions and so forth to their victims, all went down and are still gone. The ransomware group DarkSide also dropped offline after the Colonial Pipeline attack, and some people thought maybe that U.S. law enforcement or a good old Hellfire missile took them out, but the U.S. did deny any involvement in anything with that Colonial Pipeline business. U.S. President Joe Biden had recently met with Russian President Putin and told him to do something about the ransomware gang, and Mr. Putin had promised that Boris Badenoff would be put on the case. Actually, he didn't say that. He just kind of looked at Biden and sort of said, yeah, whatever. Has REvil met with an unplanned fate? Have they been sent to the gulag, or did they just decide to take all their proceeds and buy condos in Palm Springs and retire? You know, who knows? And so at this point, nobody knows what happened to them. Maybe they just decided it was a little hot water and they had a whole bunch of money, so they're just going to sort of be, below the radar for a bit. Amazon stores your Ring videos in the AWS cloud, and for the most part, anybody that wants to can see them. Hackers have shown this is very doable, and local law enforcement have accessed these videos in the past to scan for action in some specific area. But Amazon has announced that they're now going to make end-to-end encryption an option on your Ring if you want it. It sounds like early going from this article, and I didn't immediately run out and say I'm going to download the encrypted versions of all these things. But if you do have a Ring doorbell, my opinion is you may want to wait till they iron out all the details in this, because it sounded a little early adopter kind of stuff. It will require updates to your app that you're managing your Ring devices from, and it's not available on all the Ring devices. In particular, the battery-powered doorbells, which is like their most popular product, is not going to support this. But if you are using it and you have a Ring-enabled product, or a product that will support this, Ring has stated that it is true end-to-end and that even they cannot decrypt it without your passkey. So basically, it would be kept private, and if you lose your passkey, it's gone forever. A lot of people have worried about Ring doorbell cams being misused or hacked, and the info of people leaving or arriving could be used by law enforcement or porch pirates or anybody else to exploit your status if they see you leaving or they see you arriving or whatever. So there's been a lot of concern about that kind of thing in the past. Just when you're getting over your shock and dismay about print Spooler not being secure, and you thought your print nightmare, yeah, that's what they call the vulnerability, so I couldn't resist, that you thought your print nightmare was over, Microsoft has released warnings that yet another vulnerability in Print Spooler can once again allow something bad to happen. This one allows you to achieve elevated privileges by bumping up to admin and then subsequently arbitrary code execution with system-level privileges. Didn't seem as bad as Print Nightmare because that one actually allowed remote code execution. This one you're going to have to be in the network, but still. Their best advice currently is to stop and disable Print Spooler. Okay. Print Spooler is kind of hard to disable. I mean, it's not hard to disable, but it's hard to keep it disabled because it really wants to restart. So if you are dealing with this, be sure you have stopped it seriously with extreme prejudice. It's installed on basically everything Microsoft makes. So pretty much if you have a Microsoft product, you probably have a Print Spooler running. Print Spooler has been part of it. I don't know how long it's been there, but anyway, while Print Nightmare has been patched, this one, which I'm going to dub Print Unsettling Dream maybe, is still there. So, they'll probably patch it soon. Luminous Moth, a new APT linked to China, had been seen doing spear phishing attacks followed by very specialized targeting, so like spear phishing, and they went after only certain victims, even though they had succeeded with phishing attacks on a lot of other victims, and they seemed to be targeting with malware and data theft. Kaspersky named the group on Wednesday and called them Luminous Moth, and said the campaign being run now started last October and seemed initially focused only on Myanmar, but it had shifted its focus now to the Philippines. So, I don't know what their deal is in the Philippines, but Luminous Moth shares a lot of traits with a group that had been around for a while called Mustang Panda, and they had also been attacking Myanmar, were also affiliated with Chinese, and they also ran a supply chain attack, and they also used Cobalt Strike Beacon as part of their attack. So they may be working together, they may be part of the, who knows, or they just read up on each other's tactics. But they had but Mustang Panda ran a supply chain attack against the president of Myanmar's office last month. The campaign currently involves spear phishing emails with a Dropbox link that downloads a RAR archive. A Cobalt Strike Beacon is part of the deployment. And an unusual thing that they've been doing with this is part of this attack drops a signed fake Zoom app. And the app actually contains a certificate from a subsidiary of Peking University called Founder Technology. Anyway, they have a cool name, Luminous Moth. I like it. Maybe somebody will give me a cool name sometime like that. SonicWall issued an urgent alert to customers that some of the current and legacy secure VPN appliances they make were under active attack. The warning basically begs you to patch your gear to avoid an imminent ransomware campaign using stolen credentials. The warning applies to SMA 100 and the SRA secure VPN appliance that they manufacture. Mandy has said the threat actors were actively targeting these devices in the wild. The vulnerabilities were documented in June by CrowdStrike. The article has all the grim details about what's going on, which models are affected, and what's end of life and can't be patched, and on like that. So if you're using SonicWall, I would check out this article and see what you need to do, short of just taking all your stuff offline, I guess. Back in June, 7 top insurance companies formed something called CyberAccuView, which was a new company that would allow for information collection, dispersal, and analysis of cyber events. The American Property Casualty Insurance Association released a guide then on principles of ransomware and a guide to ransomware and extortion last week. I think this is in response to the continued escalation of payouts and price increases in insurance premiums, which have been going up like 20% per year, which implies that the insurance industry has not yet got a very good handle on predicting the damage from cyber, and it's going to be a tough one to get a handle on. I mean, this goes hand in hand with the White House putting up $10 million for bounties on ransomware groups and creating a new task force that focuses on ransomware and will try to leverage public and private sector information as well as providing federal resources to state and local governments who are dealing with cybersecurity issues, mostly which is ransomware. It seems to be part of a kind of virtual Cold War, which seems to be kicking off, and the insurers are taking the brunt of it as these groups continue to escalate attacks. 20 years ago yesterday, the Code Red Worm was released. I definitely remember being in a server room on that day in Colorado, and this thing was a mess. It basically used a buffer overflow in IIS, which was Microsoft's web HTTPD daemon, and the worm could spread itself with just a single HTTP GET request that had this weird URL in it. And then it basically requested a shell code be downloaded from another page that was sitting in memory. It was really the first time I had seen, anyway, a headless zero-click remote code execution, and there was, well, a new thing. It was primarily due, the main focus of Code Red Worm was that you could predict at that time where things were stored in memory. So by doing that, you could get something loaded in memory, and then you could use a buffer overflow to just pull that right on in. And that used to happen a lot because they didn't randomize anything on those old systems. So people knew where passwords were stored in memory. They knew where other things were stored in memory. The worm itself didn't really do anything beyond just basically swamping your network by trying to spread everywhere. And a lot of that old equipment in 2001 was not very resilient to it. So you got a lot of lockups and lockouts and crashes and denial of services and all kinds of stuff from the Code Red Worm. Anyway, if you're interested, I did attach a full story about that famous historical event in cybersecurity. And finally, at least now I know where all the PS4s are. I still don't know exactly where all the PS5s are, but they're probably in a warehouse in Brooklyn somewhere, crypto mining. That would be my guess based on this story. The Ukrainian security service raided an illegal crypto mining farm in a utility room at a local electric company. If you look at the pictures in the article, that's some utility room. Okay, I mean, no big deal, right? I mean, but apparently, and there are a lot of pics in the article, there were more than 3,800 PS4s that were being forced to labor against their will by their capitalist oppressors, and the electric bill was around $259,000 US a month. They weren't paying it, obviously. That's why they put it in the utility room of an electric company, because then you don't have to pay the electric bill. You just let them pay it. So probably all the PS5s are in the basement somewhere in a high school in Azerbaijan or maybe New Jersey. I'm not sure. And that is the news wrap-up for the week of 11 July 2021 and the declining time of plague. Summer is rapidly slipping away, and con season may well be upon us. Don't forget, we'll be at Unlocked in December in Orlando and InfoSec World. We do have some boots on the ground for Black Hat and DEF CON, but alas, not I. Maybe next year. Thanks. See you next time.